The ballroom was glowing with chandeliers, music swelling, and every powerful eye fixed on the polished marble floor. Yet, in the middle of executives and billionaires swirling in designer gowns and tuxedos, the CEO extended her hand, not to a partner from her world of wealth, but to the janitor still in his faded uniform, mop leaning against the wall. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she pulled him into the dance. No one knew he was a single dad. No one knew why his eyes carried a storm of pride and pain. And no one knew what she would ask him before the night ended. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to hit subscribe for more videos like this. Let's begin. Her hand didn't tremble, though the stares around her sharpened like knives. Madison Carter, the youngest CEO in her company's history, had faced corporate wars, hostile takeovers, and scandalous headlines. But nothing compared to the judgment burning across the ballroom now. "Dance with me," she whispered, her voice calm but laced with challenge. Ethan Walker froze. His calloused fingers still smelled faintly of bleach, his faded uniform damp from scrubbing the very floor they stood on. He looked at her like she was from another universe. "Ma'am, I'm not supposed to be here like this." But she didn't release his hand. Her grip was firm, steady, pulling him into the swirl of violins. "Maybe you belong here more than anyone," she said softly, with a smile that disarmed him. Around them, suits whispered like snakes. A woman draped in diamonds muttered, "This is humiliating." Another man sneered, "A janitor on the ballroom floor? Ridiculous." Ethan's throat tightened. For years he had been invisible, scraping gum from under tables, buffing marble until it gleamed, sweeping up after men who wouldn't remember his face. But tonight, under the burning glow of crystal chandeliers, the most powerful woman in the room had chosen him. His steps faltered at first, awkward and heavy. But then, he remembered. He remembered Lily, his little girl, spinning barefoot in their small kitchen as he guided her clumsy steps on cracked linoleum. He remembered her giggles, her whispered, "Daddy, you dance like a prince." So Ethan straightened. His shoulders rose, his movement steadied, and he let Madison lead him into the music. And when she leaned closer, her voice dropped low, words threading into his soul. "Ethan, don't let their eyes break you. They've never had to fight the way you have." His jaw clenched. Her words weren't pity, they were truth. For the first time in years, he felt seen. Not as the janitor, not as the single dad struggling to survive, but as a man who still had worth. He didn't know it yet, but this dance wasn't just a moment. It was the spark that would set everything ablaze. The final notes of the violin faded, leaving a silence so sharp it felt like glass about to shatter. Madison and Ethan stood in the center of the ballroom, their breaths caught in the same rhythm, while the entire room buzzed with scandal. A man in a navy suit sneered, his voice dripping with disdain. "Madison Carter, is this some kind of charity performance? What's next? Letting the janitors run the board meetings?" Laughter rippled through the crowd, harsh and hollow. Ethan's chest tightened, his calloused hands curling into fists at his sides. Years of swallowed pride pressed against his ribs, but he stood still, because one outburst could cost him the job he needed more than air. Madison's father, Richard Carter, the chairman of the board, stepped forward. His silver hair gleamed under the lights, his expression carved in stone. "Enough." His voice cut through the whispers like a blade. "Madison, what have you done?" Madison didn't flinch. She raised her chin, her hand still loosely holding Ethan's. even as her father's eyes burned with disappointment. "I danced," she said simply. "With him?" Richard's voice thundered, his fingers stabbing the air toward Ethan. "In front of investors? Do you realize what you've just done to this company's image?" Gasps spread again, but Madison didn't look away. Her eyes flicked to Ethan, whose shoulders stiffened under the weight of humiliation. She saw it. The years of dismissal, the exhaustion etched into the lines of his face. And she wasn't about to let him walk back into the shadows. "Ethan Walker has worked here longer than half the men in this room," Madison said, her tone calm but sharp. "He cleans your offices. He fixes what you break. He makes sure this building still shines when you leave it in ruins after your parties. If anyone deserves respect, it's him." The words landed like grenades. Ethan swallowed hard, caught between awe and terror. No one had ever spoken his name in a room like this. He bowed his head, whispering, "Thank you, ma'am. But I should go. Please, don't make this harder for yourself." He tried to step back, but her grip tightened. For the first time, her voice cracked, not from weakness, but from urgency. "Ethan, stay." The single word silenced the ballroom. "Stay?" The guests turned, whispering furiously. Investors exchanged nervous looks. Richard Carter's jaw locked. "Stay? What is this, Madison? Are you humiliating yourself and this company on purpose?" But Ethan was frozen. "Stay." The word echoed in his mind, colliding with memories of his daughter asleep in their tiny apartment. Her school tuition letter folded under unpaid bills. He couldn't risk everything for a woman who lived in a world he would never belong to. And yet, there was something in her eyes. Not pity, not performance. Something real. Before he could respond, venom struck from the crowd. She's losing her mind. This company's finished if she keeps pulling stunts like this. Dance with trash, and you'll smell like trash. The words cut deeper than knives. Ethan's fists clenched, the old anger rising, anger from every sneer, every order barked at him, every reminder that he was just the janitor. He turned to leave, but Madison's voice stopped him cold. "If you walk away now, you let them win." Her words froze him in place. Slowly, he turned back, eyes locked on hers. She wasn't asking him to stay for her. She was asking him to stay for himself. And for the first time in his life, Ethan didn't lower his gaze. He met the eyes of the men who mocked him, of the women who sneered at his uniform, and he didn't look away. "Do you know what I see when I look at this man?" Madison's voice rose now, reaching the back of the hall. "I see someone who shows up every single day without complaint. I see someone who works harder than anyone in this room, while raising a daughter on his own. And you think you're better than him? Tell me, how many of you could survive even 1 week living his life?" The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. No one spoke, no one dared. Ethan's chest rose and fell, his heart hammering in his ears. He wanted to disappear. He wanted to thank her. He wanted to tell her she was making a mistake. But before he could say a word, Richard Carter slammed his glass down onto the table. "That's enough," his voice boomed, his fury undeniable. "You will not destroy everything I built for some janitor. Madison, we are leaving." But Madison shook her head, her voice like steel. "No, Father, I'm not leaving. Not without him." The room gasped, as if the chandeliers had fallen. Investors stumbled over themselves, whispers breaking into chaos. Ethan stared at her, wide-eyed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Madison's answer was quiet, almost trembling. but true. Because kindness matters more than their approval. And because, Ethan, you deserve to be seen. For the first time in years, Ethan felt his throat burn, not with anger, but with something else. Something he thought he had lost long ago. Hope. Ethan's pulse thundered in his ears as the ballroom spun with whispers. His body screamed at him to step back, to retreat into the safety of silence. But Madison's words clung to him like a lifeline. Richard Carter, his face flushed with fury, pointed a trembling finger. You're humiliating yourself, Madison. This company's reputation is everything. That man, his voice dripped venom, doesn't belong here. Ethan's jaw clenched. He'd heard that word, doesn't belong, his entire life. From landlords, from teachers, from bosses who laughed behind his back. But hearing it now, in front of hundreds, with Madison standing beside him, it twisted into something unbearable. He took a step forward, surprising even himself. His voice, rough and steady, carried across the ballroom. With respect, sir, I've cleaned these floors long enough to know the dirt isn't always on the ground. A collective gasp swept the room. Madison's lips curved, the hint of a smile flickering, while Richard's face darkened like a storm about to break. You dare, Richard began. But Ethan didn't stop. Years of silence poured out like floodwater. You think I'm nothing because I wear this uniform. But I've raised a daughter alone since she was 4. I've worked double shifts, skipped meals, walked miles when my car broke down, just so she could have shoes for school. So forgive me if I don't bow tonight. Because maybe you've got power, sir. But I've got something you'll never understand. The room was still. Investors shifted uncomfortably. Someone coughed into their champagne glass. But Madison looked at him as though she'd never seen anyone so alive. What's that? Richard's voice was low, sharp, mocking. Ethan met his gaze. Dignity. The word rang like thunder, and for a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then, as if the universe had conspired, the sound of small, hurried footsteps broke the silence. From the back of the hall, a little girl with messy brown curls came running, her tiny shoes squeaking against marble. Daddy! Gasps rippled again. Ethan's heart stopped. Lily. She wasn't supposed to be here. His neighbor had been watching her. Panic surged, but before he could move, she threw her arms around his leg, clinging tightly. I was scared you wouldn't come home, she whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan bent down, scooping her into his arms, the whispers sharpened into blades now. A child? He brought his daughter here? Unbelievable. But Madison didn't look scandalized. She looked softened. Something in her eyes shifted, a rare vulnerability slipping past the armor of a CEO. She stepped closer, brushing a hand over Lily's curls. Hi, sweetheart, Madison said gently. You must be Lily. The little girl nodded shyly, her face buried in her father's shoulder. Madison's lips curved into a smile, warm and tender, a contrast to the ice around them. Your dad is very brave, you know. Ethan's throat burned. He hadn't wanted Lily to see him like this, to feel the sting of humiliation he had carried for years. But Madison's kindness was like a shield, turning whispers into background noise. Richard's voice snapped the spell. This is pathetic. Madison, if you don't walk out of here right now, I'll make sure neither of you ever sets foot in this company again. The threat hung heavy, brutal, final. But Madison's hand tightened on Ethan's arm. She lifted her chin, eyes blazing with a fire Ethan hadn't seen in anyone before. No, Father. If you can't see his worth, Then maybe it's not Ethan who doesn't belong here. Maybe it's you. The entire ballroom erupted. Some gasped in horror, others whispered with delight at the scandal unraveling before their eyes. Investors looked from Richard to Madison, sensing a fracture in the empire they had all depended on. Ethan's heart pounded. He didn't know what scared him more, losing his job or watching Madison burn every bridge she'd built for him. "Madison," he began, his voice hoarse, "you don't have to do this for me. You'll lose everything." Her gaze snapped to his, steady and unyielding. "Then maybe it's time to build something better." For a long, tense moment, no one moved. The chandeliers seemed to hum, the air heavy with unspoken war. And in that moment, Ethan realized something terrifying and exhilarating. This wasn't about a dance anymore. This was about survival, about dignity, about standing tall in a world determined to crush him. And Madison wasn't just standing beside him. She was daring the world to try and take him down. The ballroom was chaos. Investors whispering in corners, waiters frozen mid-step, and Richard Carter's fury blazing like wildfire. But in the middle of it all stood Madison, her hand still on Ethan's arm, her words echoing louder than the orchestra had minutes before. "If you can't see his worth, maybe it's you who doesn't belong here." Richard's jaw trembled, his pride bleeding into rage. "Do you hear yourself, Madison? You're throwing away your reputation, this company, your entire future for him." He spit the word like it was poison. Ethan shifted uncomfortably, Lily's arms still wrapped around his neck. His heart pounded like a war drum. "He's right," he whispered to Madison, low enough only she could hear. "This is your world, not mine. I can't let you risk everything for me." But Madison turned, her eyes fierce, her voice cutting. "Ethan, do you think I became CEO to impress a room of cowards? I fought for this seat to make a difference, to stand for something more than money and lies. And right now, the difference I'm choosing to make is you." The words pierced through him. He had never been chosen, not by the world, not by opportunity, not even by life itself. He had always been the man cleaning up after everyone else's mistakes. And now, someone like Madison Carter was choosing him in front of the world. Richard slammed his fist against the table, rattling glasses. "Enough. You're done, Madison. If you walk out of here with that janitor, consider yourself cut off. No board seat, no inheritance, nothing." The room gasped. Investors shifted uneasily, watching the empire unravel. But Madison didn't blink. She looked straight at her father and said, calm and sharp, "Then nothing is better than living in a world that can't see his value. I'd rather lose everything than lose my integrity." The ballroom erupted again. Shock, horror, fascination. But Ethan couldn't hear any of it. His eyes burned, his throat tight. He had taught Lily never to back down when the world tried to tell her she was less than others. But here he was, ready to shrink away, while Madison stood like a shield between him and every cruel whisper. "Why?" Ethan asked softly, broken. "Why would you do this for me?" Madison turned to him then, her face softening. "Because I've seen men with billions in their accounts who have nothing in their souls. And then there's you, who's raised a daughter with love and strength despite everything against you. That's real wealth, Ethan. That's worth fighting for." Lily stirred in his arms, looking up with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy, can we stay with her?" The question shattered him. His little girl, who had only ever known cramped apartments and second-hand toys, had just asked to stay in the presence of the most powerful woman in the room. His voice cracked as he kissed the top of her head. "Sweetheart, we don't belong here. But Madison's voice cut in firmly, her hand pressing over his. You belong wherever you decide to stand. And if you'll let me, I want you to stand here, with me. The silence that followed wasn't filled with mockery this time. It was stunned, raw, disbelieving silence. For the first time, Ethan didn't shrink back. He looked around the room, the same faces that had sneered at him. And instead of shame, he felt something else rising inside him. Pride. He turned to Madison, his voice steady. If I stay, it won't be easy. Her lips curved, fierce and sure. Nothing worth it ever is. Richard's voice cracked, venomous. You'll regret this, Madison. But she didn't even look at him. Her eyes stayed on Ethan as she whispered, Stay. And this time, Ethan didn't hesitate. He nodded, pulling Lily closer, his heart finally steady. Then I'll stay. The room erupted again. Scandal, outrage, disbelief. But none of it mattered. For the first time in years, Ethan wasn't invisible. For the first time, he wasn't just surviving. He was chosen. And as Madison slipped her hand into his, the chandeliers above seemed to burn brighter, as if the ballroom itself knew. This wasn't the end. It was the beginning.